Hi everyone, my name is Patricia Garcia from Your Vision Financial Solutions. Today we've got Alex Holland from Kelly Lawyers and we'll be talking about buying and selling property. Before we jump into some of the legal stuff, the information we're discussing today is general in nature and shouldn't be considered specific financial or legal advice. So always make sure you consult professionals for tailored advice to your situation. Now let's dive in. So Alex Holland from Kelly Lawyers, she specializes in property law. And we're going to be talking about some of the things we need to be aware of in buying and selling property, which is very relevant to our mutual clients. So Alex, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself and your business?
Sure. Thanks, Patricia. Hi, everyone. So I am a solicitor and co-director and principal of Kelly Lawyers. Kelly Lawyers is a law firm operating in Ascot on Racecourse Road, and we've been operating for this location for about 24 years. I myself, I've been a solicitor for 12 years, and I can provide advice to my clients in multiple areas of law, but a large part of my practice is property law, which includes conveyancing.
Very good. Thanks, Alex. And I know there's a lot of tips and traps when it comes to buying and selling property. So what's the first thing that people should know when it comes to the legal side of buying or selling property?
Sure. So in Queensland, most people who are buying and selling will use a standard form contract, which is really good because it means that everyone knows the terms that they're going to be buying and selling property. But something that people might not realise when they're buying in Queensland is that a seller doesn't have to sell you a property with all building approvals and final inspection certificates. So that means that you might buy a property and then later discover that it doesn't have all approvals in place, and whether that's for the home or just an extension or a patio. And if you've become the owner of that property, all those issues will become your responsibility and problem to fix. And that could cost tens of thousands of dollars in some circumstances, because you'll have to apply for development approval. You might have to have building works done. In the worst case, council might order you to actually demolish that structure, and then you found that you've purchased a property that's no longer worth what you paid for.
Yeah, that would be horrible. And it happens actually more than more than people would think. So really important to make sure you get legal advice and do all the searches and consult a lawyer when you're buying and also selling property. All right. So what about due diligence? What other aspects should clients be focusing on apart from the searches, for example?
Yeah, so searches are definitely a large part of the due diligence. So if you're a seller, you might want to do a few searches just in case you have concerns about how your title is looking, or if you have perhaps some dealings registered on the title, if you're not aware of anything that you might need to disclose. But certainly if you're the buyer, because you're the one who's going to inherit potentially all these issues, it's really important on the buyer to conduct searches. And these searches can be everything from title searches to a survey plan, which might put you on notice if there's any issues with the boundaries of the property. It's council records, as I mentioned earlier. It's searches to do with if there's any charges owing on the property, if you have a flooding risk potentially at the property, which is becoming more and more important. And so searches are certainly one element of due diligence. Another element of due diligence is physical inspections. Of course, as your lawyer, I'm not going to go out to the property and physically inspect it. So you've got to make sure that you're inspecting the property, or at least having someone inspect it on your behalf, that you're having necessary building and pest inspections, that you're perhaps considering having a professional survey done to the property, if there's anything that might indicate that there could be issues. And then obviously, if you're getting finance, you're going to have a valuation of the property conducted to make sure that the bank or financier is satisfied.
Yeah, so many things to be aware of. And things like boundary issues. That's something that's come up recently in terms of just because there's a fence where in the property that you're buying doesn't mean that that's actually the boundary. So people might not be aware of that. So making sure that they actually look at the survey, that if there's any issues, potentially get a proper survey done, right? So it can be a big trap if you don't do that correctly.
Yeah, that's right. And because under the terms of a normal contract, the only way that you might have rights against a seller is if you go and obtain a professional survey.
Yeah. Now, financing, you touched on that, and as a financial advisor, we get heavily involved with the financing side of things and the projections for our clients to make sure they can afford the property, that we've taken everything into consideration, that we've structured the loans appropriately. But how does financing tie into the legal aspects?
Yeah, sure. So we need to liaise with our clients early on to make sure that if you're a buyer, for example, that the amount that you are borrowing from a bank or the amount of cash resources that you have is sufficient to cover all costs, because it's not just the purchase price for the property, but you also have to factor in the cost of your searches, your inspections, legal costs, as well as bank charges if you're getting finance. You also need to consider transfer duty, or stamp duty as it used to be called. And all of these costs can become quite significant. There's also titles office registry fees. And so it's our job, or rather part of our services, to make sure that you're well aware as early as possible of the total funds required to complete. And then on the other side, if you're a seller, and particularly if you have a mortgage owing on the property already, making sure that whatever is going to be received at settlement is sufficient to pay out that mortgage.
Yeah, there's so much to consider. This is why we always sit down with our clients, make sure they really understand all the costs, all the additional ongoing costs. When you're buying property, a lot of people just look at the mortgage and forget all the additional repairs and interest rate rises and other things that may come up, and making sure that they include all of that incorporate. So there's so much planning that needs to happen before you actually commit to buying property, and that comes from doing the financial planning side of things as well as getting legal advice. So really important.
Yeah. I really agree with you there, Patricia, because mortgage documents are legally binding contracts. So it's really important that if you're obtaining a loan to complete the purchase, that you really understand all the terms, especially around repayment and what could happen if you default. So that's where we link in with our clients to make sure that they're getting appropriate financial advice, but also if they need legal advice in terms of the loan mortgage documents, we can offer those services as well.
Yeah, definitely. Very important. All right, Alex. Now, what about tax? Where might you get involved, or are there any tips or things you want to highlight to our listeners today?
Well, it's certainly a case that if you're a seller, you need to be obtaining advice from your financial advisors and accountant as soon as possible if you believe that there might be capital gains tax arising on the sale of the property. Or if you're even not sure, then make sure that you get that advice as early as possible. It's also really important to consider that if you're buying, transfer duty can be a significant cost. So I've seen cases where with the property prices rising as they are, just a fairly normal property in the Brisbane suburbs can arise in a transfer duty cost of somewhere between 20 to 35,000. And so with such large tax and duties, you really need to make sure, and it's crucial, that you're getting both legal and financial advice.
Yeah, definitely. We certainly help clients around the capital gains implications and how they may structure the sale, or sometimes if they have multiple investment properties or multiple properties that they've lived on in the past, there's ways that you can get tax advice around the best way in which place you should claim as your principal residence, when you get exemption, when you don't. So there's actually quite some complex strategies that can save a lot of tax. So really important to work with your advisor and accountant before you sell, and also planning ahead, actually. So sometimes if you plan ahead, especially when you've bought a property, lived in it, then bought another property, moved into that property, and then perhaps maybe even went back to the original property. Sometimes clients do that because they might be renovating homes, and then so there's so much that can come into play when it comes to the capital gains that might arise on the sale of the property. And if you do it the right way, you might save thousands and thousands of dollars of tax. So very important to get advice around that. All right, so as you've heard today, there's a lot to be aware of when buying or selling. So certainly make sure that before you sign any contracts that you're getting professional advice and meeting your legal obligations. Now, when it comes to any final thoughts for our viewers and listeners today, Alex, do you have anything else you want to finish with?
Sure, and I echo your sentiments, Patricia. I would certainly advise that whether you're a seller or a buyer, contact your lawyer as soon as possible. It's really important to get advice before you sign the contract. Even when you're a seller, you might have particular knowledge about that property that if you don't disclose that or incorporate special conditions into the property, that might give the buyer certain rights against you, which could lead to compensation or termination of the contract. And then if you're a buyer, depending on your needs and your requirements and what you might want to know about this property before you're fully committed and it becomes an unconditional contract, then we might be able to advise you on certain special conditions or searches that should be done before you get to that point.
Couldn't agree more, Alex. Thanks for all your insights today. It's been really helpful. I'm sure there's a lot that people weren't aware of that now they can go and get advice around. So thank you for tuning in. We hope this has been informative. Remember, this is general advice only, so make sure you seek professional advice.
Thanks, Patricia. It's been my pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.